Samson, the hero with extraordinary strength, but deep inside, he always carried a question in his heart. Does power truly free him from loneliness, or is it just a burden pulling him down into the abyss of betrayal? In the moment of grasping the lion's jaw, Samson felt life flowing through his hands. But is that strength a gift from God, or a curse to test his soul? He stood amidst the storm of violence. Enemies' bones piled at his feet. But the more foes he defeated, the deeper Samson sank into torment. Is this destruction truly his mission? Betrayal did not come from swords or arrows. It was the gentle touch of Delilah, the only one who knew how to weaken the strongest man. Samson realized the truth too late. Who is the real enemy? Samson could bring down the temple, but can he redeem himself? Audience, will you choose to stand with strength or compassion when faced with the temptation of power? Samson grew up under the protection of Jehovah, and day by day, month by month, his extraordinary strength manifested. But it was not just physical strength, but the power of a mission destined since his birth. However, with that strength came heavy responsibilities. Can Samson overcome all the temptations and traps of life, or will his strength become the very thing that brings him down? One day, as Samson walked through the hills of Philistine lands, he encountered a fierce lion. Without a trace of fear, he confronted the wild beast, but to him, it was not just an animal. It was the symbol of his first challenge. Samson did not simply slay the lion. In its death, he saw warnings about the future, about the power he wielded. Will it bring salvation or destruction? On his way back, Samson saw the carcass of the lion he had killed, now filled with honey. He took the honey and ate, but that sweetness contained a bitter paradox. Was he savoring victory or beginning a descent into the abyss? At the same time, a question echoed in Samson's mind. Is this strength mine or from a higher deity? And for whose benefit will I use it? The self-doubt continuously haunted him, like a call from the depths. Samson loved a woman named Delilah, but that love did not only bring joy and happiness. It was a spiritual test, where faith and loyalty were made into a game. Each time Delilah asked about the secret of his strength, Samson felt the cords binding his heart gradually loosening. He knew that once the secret was revealed, his fate would no longer be in his own hands. But Samson, like a captive beast, continued to plunge into the game of destiny. In the end, he realized that not only his physical strength, but also his soul was gradually being bound. Samson faced the final question. Would he give up everything to save his soul, or let hatred and anger lead to the destruction of everything he loved? In that fateful moment, Samson was betrayed. Delilah cut his hair, the symbol of his divine strength. He felt weakness spreading throughout his body, but more frightening was the weakness within his heart. Amid the mocking laughter of his enemies, Samson knelt down, feeling the weight of all past mistakes and decisions. His strength had left him, but in his mind, something new began to emerge. And then, from deep within the darkness of his soul, Samson found a forgotten faith. He prayed to the Lord, not to regain his strength, but for a chance to atone for the mistakes he had made. Finally, in the decisive moment, Samson stood between the two pillars of the temple, where his enemies were celebrating victory. He was no longer a mighty hero, but just a man seeking redemption. "O Lord," Samson prayed, "please grant me strength one last time, not for myself, but for your people. Let me fulfill the mission you assigned me from the day I was born." Samson pushed down the pillars, and the temple collapsed amid horrific screams. The enemies were destroyed, but at the same time, Samson sacrificed his own life. Did his sacrifice truly bring redemption? Samson walked into the village, his gaze cold and determined. But inside, was he struggling between love and loyalty to his family? Each step weighed down by moral burdens. Upon meeting her, Samson felt the warmth he had long craved. But her smile carried a fierce wind that swept away his heart. This love, is it destiny or destruction? Every time Samson's eyes met hers, his heart ached. Is this choice a sign of betrayal to his own beliefs? Or is it a test set by the gods? His parents had warned him, but Samson could not resist his feelings. His heart was torn between his family and the Philistine woman. Was he heading toward darkness or light? A lion suddenly leaped out from the forest, eyes full of rage and bloodlust. But Samson did not flinch. Another anger rose within him, as powerful as thunder. With extraordinary strength, he charged into battle. In an instant, his hands gripped the lion's body, as if grasping his own fate. Was that anger only for the beast or for his own heart? Everything happened so quickly. When Samson looked back, the lion lay defeated at his feet. Panting, he gazed at the spilled blood. But was this victory truly his? Samson stood over the lion's carcass, amidst the whispering wind. Victory made him strong but also dangerous. This strength, will it be a blessing or a curse? His gaze shifted to the darkening sky. He sensed a change within, no longer just an ordinary man. Would every action henceforth be driven by an invisible anger? Samson returned, but his heart was no longer whole. That strength not only destroyed enemies, but also threatened himself. Could he control it before it destroyed what was precious? The road ahead suddenly became hazy, not just from dust, but from his choices. Love, anger, and this strength, where were they leading him? To salvation or doom? The Philistine woman. Did she truly love him, or was she a piece of a dark destiny already arranged? Each of her smiles shook Samson's faith in himself. Samson began to wonder, could he escape his destiny, or was he stepping into an inescapable vortex? This anger, is it liberation or an ancient curse? Every action has consequences. Every anger has its cost. But could Samson see the boundary between his enemies and himself, or had he strayed too far from himself to return? Audience, what would you do if you held unmatched power in your hands? Would you use it for love or destruction? This is the question each of us must answer. Samson looked ahead, unaware that each step brought him closer to destiny. And you, which path would you take when faced with this choice? In that mysterious moment, Samson's riddle was not just a game but a test of loyalty. The only answer lay deep within the opponent's soul. The banquet was still filled with laughter, but in everyone's heart, anxiety hissed like a cold wind. Each glance scrutinized Samson, as if seeking an escape from that mental trap. Samson's wife looked at him, her eyes full of panic. She knew what would happen if the answer was not found. It was not just humiliation, but imminent danger. When the pressure reached its peak, she gave in. Betrayal burned like a flame within her fear. She revealed the secret a deed from which there was no turning back. The Philistines laughed in satisfaction, but there was something unsettling in their eyes. They had defeated Samson, but this victory was not as sweet as they thought. Samson could not hide his anger. His face darkened, his eyes filled with pain and resentment. Is it true that people are most easily deceived when they trust those they love the most? In his rage, Samson traded calm for violence. He left the wedding, and the death of 30 Philistines was the price of betrayal. Samson found no solace in revenge. Instead, he grew more sorrowful, realizing the irreparable loss. The haunting question, can betrayal be forgiven? And what of the betrayer? Was she truly at fault, or just a puppet in the hands of the greedy? Could she forgive herself? The onlookers felt the heavy tension, not from the violent acts, but from the moral question forming in their minds. Do we all have our limits? The limits of forgiveness, the limits of endurance, and the limits of loyalty. Sometimes, the strongest person is not the one with physical strength, but the one who can forgive. After all, Samson remained alone in his own storm. He looked toward the horizon, where peace seemed to have gone. Is the strongest person the loneliest one? Betrayal made his heart cold, but also ignited an unquenchable flame. A flame of revenge or a flame of forgiveness, only he could decide. The Philistines left, thinking they had won. But what kind of victory was this? What was the real price they had to pay? Samson walked on, his heart heavy with questions about life, about people, and about himself. Does revenge truly bring peace or just add another wound? If it were you, would you choose revenge or forgiveness? The answer is not just for Samson, but for you, the one following this story. Flames erupted across the fields, burning not only ripe grains, but also igniting hatred between two peoples. Samson's silhouette stood against the fiery sky, a sardonic smile challenging all destiny. The wind carried the screams of the Philistine farmers, not just for the crops, but for the anger and confusion as an entire harvest vanished. The price of betrayal had become terrifying. Is this fire merely revenge for Samson's pain? Or is it a blaze burning the moral boundaries we all must face? What are the limits of a person deeply wounded? Resentment didn't stem only from Samson. The Philistines also harbored hatred. They lost not only their crops but their pride, and Samson became the enemy they wished to eliminate. But is revenge the only way to resolve pain? Or does revenge open an endless cycle of violence, pulling everyone into a vortex of destruction? Samson knew the Philistines would not stop. They would retaliate, and that made him smile coldly. The war had begun, and there was no escape for anyone. Samson's heart was filled with bitterness. Betrayed love had turned him into someone else, no longer knowing compassion or forgiveness. Everything now was just a fiery game of chess. The Philistine people now saw Samson as a giant with unmatched strength, but deep inside, he was just a wounded man pushed to the brink of despair. The fields lay desolate, remnants of fire still smoldering, but the war had only just begun. Everything was leading up to an inevitable confrontation where neither side wished to yield. Samson stood atop a hill, gazing down at the scorched fields. He thought of what he had lost, what he had done, and wondered if he could ever find peace in his soul again. The Philistines would come, filled with anger and a determination for revenge. But Samson was not afraid. He knew that fate had charted this path for him, and he would walk it without regret. The fire spread not only across the fields, but also in the hearts of those who witnessed it. It was a warning. When people let emotions take over, the consequences become immeasurable. Could anyone stop this chain of events before everything became irreparable? Or had everyone been swept into the whirlwind of hatred and revenge? What is the difference between justice and revenge? When do people begin to lose moral values just because of pain and hatred? The Philistines had begun to move, but as for you, the audience, what will you do? Will we stand by and watch the flames of hatred continue to spread? Or will we find a path to reconciliation? The question lies within each person. How will we choose to face pain? Will we seek revenge or forgiveness, even when it's so difficult? As Samson stood amid the enemy horde, his eyes blazed with anger. Gripping the jawbone of a donkey, each strike resounded like the call of destiny. Blood and earth mingled, painting a dark picture of destruction. Samson was battling not only the enemies before him, but also the obsessions within his own heart. The screams of the Philistines were like warning bells for an unending war, both outside and within him. Each time the jawbone swung, each person fell. Samson was no longer a hero defending his homeland, but a symbol of uncontrolled violence. He was being consumed by his own strength. Around him, enemies fell like flowers crushed in a storm. But did Samson realize that with each enemy who fell, a part of his humanity was also fading away? The jawbone, a seemingly inanimate tool, had become a weapon sowing terror. It not only severed the lives of enemies, but also cut the ties binding Samson to compassion. The sun gradually set, weak light reflecting off the blood-stained jawbone. Behind the bloody victories, was there still room for forgiveness? Samson stood motionless, like a war god lost to himself. Amid the corpses and wails, Samson saw his reflection in the eyes of the last enemy. Those eyes, full of fear, were perhaps the last reminder of his own humanity. But that moment passed swiftly. Samson, in his fury, delivered the final blow, ending not only the enemy, but also the last vestige of conscience within himself. Is boundless strength the most terrifying curse? Samson began to realize that power, when not controlled by compassion, is just a path leading to destruction. He bowed down, looking at the bloodied jawbone in his hand. Was it still a tool to liberate his people, or had it become the thing that destroyed him? Strength had saved him, but at what cost? Silently, Samson stood on the battlefield, alone and bewildered. The enemy horde was now just fading shadows. And he, a hero, now bore a heavier heart than ever before. Every victory has its price. Is Samson ready to face the truth that sometimes the greatest enemy is oneself, not those who fell before him? His heart no longer beat with pride, only with cold emptiness. The strength he once took pride in had now become an unshakable burden. Perhaps Samson realized that in this battle, the only person he truly defeated was not the Philistines, but his own ego. Amid the silence of the battlefield, only one question echoed in Samson's mind. Can a person truly win when they have lost themselves? Do you think absolute power changes a person's compassion? Or does true strength lie in the ability to control oneself? In a moment of weakness, Samson did not expect that the very person he loved was the deceiver. Every glance, every sweet gesture from Delilah was merely an act for a cruel plan. Delilah watched Samson sleep, her heart trembling slightly. She knew that with just one snip, everything would change. But the temptation of power was too great. As the scissors glided through Samson's hair, everything seemed to slow down. Each strand fell to the ground, like symbols of betrayal and loss. Samson's strength was not just in his hair, but also in his faith. And now he had been betrayed both physically and spiritually. In his dreams, Samson still saw himself as a hero, protecting his people. But when he awoke, everything had changed. No more strength, no more faith. Delilah stood there, watching the once invincible man now lying weak. She felt a twinge of sorrow, but gain had clouded her conscience. Samson opened his eyes but no longer saw the light of faith. He looked at Delilah, eyes filled with disappointment, but without reproach. Delilah turned away, her heart conflicted. She knew she had betrayed the one she loved. But was this the price she was willing to pay for wealth and power? Samson, now without strength, was captured and dragged out like a criminal. He felt every binding rope, but heavier than all was the betrayal. They dragged Samson through the streets, and the crowd mocked him. To them, Samson was no longer a hero, just an ordinary man defeated by the one he loved. Delilah, standing afar, watched. Did she feel regret? Or had she completely closed her eyes to the consequences of betrayal? Samson looked up at the sky, his eyes now filled with serenity. He had lost everything, but was there something still remaining deep within his soul? In a brief moment, Samson prayed. He did not ask for forgiveness, but hoped for one last chance to save his people from oppression. The oppressors dragged Samson into the temple, where humiliation and challenge would reach their peak. But in his heart, a bit of light remained. Delilah was present in the crowd. She saw Samson's eyes, but this time there was no anger. Instead, a silent reminder. Can you live with this betrayal forever? And you, if faced with the choice between love and fame, what would you do? Would you dare betray the one you love for temptations beyond reach? In the darkness, Samson lost not only his eyes but also hope. Yet his hair, the symbol of his strength, quietly grew back like a ray of light in the night of despair. Pushed into the public square, under the mocking laughter of the Philistines, Samson stood silently, a once strong man now defeated both physically and spiritually. They saw him as entertainment, a loser. But within him was not only shame but also determination, a final mission. When Samson's hands touched the two cold stone pillars, the rough feel awakened a latent strength within him, a longing for vengeance. He could not see, but in his mind, he clearly envisioned what would happen, the temple collapsing, and thousands of Philistines falling under the power of sacrifice. Samson whispered a prayer. Lord, grant me strength one last time, not to save myself, but to fulfill my destined mission. A strange wind blew through, as if answering his prayer. His hands, trembling yet strong, gripped the two pillars as if to merge with the stone. The mocking laughter suddenly ceased as the ground beneath. Samson began to shake. He knew this was his final moment. Panic-stricken screams erupted, but Samson did not hear them. In his mind, there was only peace. He had done it. He had paid the price. With all his remaining strength, Samson pushed the two pillars, and the temple collapsed. The sound of breaking stone and screaming people blended into a fateful symphony. Thousands of Philistines were buried beneath the rubble. Samson, amidst the ruins, lay there, not a prisoner anymore, but a warrior who had fulfilled his mission. His final battle was not just revenge, but also a question about the meaning of sacrifice. Was his death worthwhile? Or just an inescapable tragedy? Samson died, but his story lived on, not only in the memory of the Israelites, but also in the hearts of all who heard of his sacrifice. Behind the shattered bricks, a deeper meaning emerged. Is true strength not in muscles, but in steadfastness and faith? Samson's story poses a question to all of us. Are we willing to give up everything for a higher purpose, or will we remain trapped in our own selfishness? Are you willing to sacrifice everything for what you believe in, or will you stand by as the opportunity passes? Only you have the answer. Samson stood there, extraordinary strength in his hands, but his heart filled with confusion. Amid the howling wind, he wondered, is that strength truly a blessing or a curse? Once, love and loyalty filled Samson's heart. But each heartache, each lie, seemed to erode a part of his humanity. Could strength save him, or was it merely a tool of destruction? In the moment of facing destiny, Samson knew he had to decide. But would he choose the path of redemption or continue to slip into the vortex of destruction and ambition? What would you choose if you were him? We may understand Samson, but have we learned anything from his decisions? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to continue exploring these philosophical and emotional stories. Your answer may help others understand themselves better.